Yeah, me again. Yep. So I think I'll make this the draft video for the game series of videos, the game of life. But I guess it gives me an excuse to also to talk about Ante Kantavad. Maybe I'll read some of the comments on some of his recent videos. They're just bizarre. I mean, all these nihilists. I mean, these people are so glib about the living condition. You know, they apparently can imagine no horror horrible enough to truly frighten them. No experience bad enough. It's almost this. I can't rationally. I just can't. I can't find any basis for this lack of humility in the face of what you see happening to people every day. And then when you calculate the attrition in this biosphere, the daily horrors, and those conscious experiences are so bleak and bad. Why would I accept them as the price of rooting for the home team for a few moments of splendor in the grass? I'm sorry, it's insane. I can't say any other word. It's an insane devotion to a mindless process of chemical reaction, chemical reproduction, a sustaining and resustaining fire, a fire that just keeps burning. So you just pause because you're just like, I'm on Earth and I have to explain this. So anyway, the idea is to make a game that more closely, a board game, Monopoly style, that duplicates, this attrition. They're just all over the place. I have to take some home to the turtle, I guess. Turtles. Anyway, frog. Damn fly is biting me, damn it. Bugging me too. Anyway, so yeah, like I said, the idea would be a board game. I don't know if somebody wants to help out, but the idea would be to come up with some kind of statistics about what the average existence is. There's a video, I guess it was a book written about, the 100 people and what percentage of the 100 people have a college education and what percentage have clean water and all of that. And that's good for the human stuff. But, just a statistic thing. If the game is played for realsies, so to speak, in terms of your real likelihoods of what you're going to be if you're a living, conscious living thing. I don't see much point in doing the unconscious part because I'm sure it would be good for demonstration purposes. How many lives do you have to run through before you get to a life form? That would be something you would want to experience, something you'd want to live as a conscious entity. You want consciousness in that state. So again, I mean, philosophically, I just don't see how you can't communicate with people who can't recognize this qualitative difference, between a comfortable conscious state and a horribly tortured conscious state. And people who can't make these distinctions or can't place any value designation on them. Snake. There's nothing to talk about really. Because the only important subjects are going to be subjects related to these value exchanges. And if you're not capable of applying value to these conditions, we don't have anything to talk about, that's for sure. We might have every reason to find each other's existence dangerous and obnoxious, for certain. Anyway, obnoxious to our senses, obnoxious to our reason and our logic and our intelligence. Even that's been suspect. They're playing now. Not only have they disengaged the idea of feeling states, now intelligence itself is suspect in some of the comments, as if the definition or function or value of intelligence is in resolving truth, resolving the formulas, the equations, including the value equations that define this reality. And that somehow that intelligence has nothing to do with logic and reason and evidence, but somehow would be better described or defined as that which produces bliss. I mean, it's just an amazing perversion of function, and again another destruction of what I consider to be a fundamental value, which is accurate description of the model, accurate understandings, unbiased, certainly, if possible. But that's the other thing. They're just going to argue that there's a bias in the fact that I have negative conscious experiences, and somehow they define my understanding of the math. So they're almost arguing that if you have knowledge of negative numbers, you can't do math anymore. You're biased. Something like that. It doesn't make any sense. You have to have knowledge of the numbers to be able to do math. It's a critical element to performing the function. So that doesn't make any sense either. There's a lot of doesn't make any sense going on here. So anyway, I shall add more when I get to the place where I will add more from. Yeah, that's it. So till then, and such, and so forth and whatnot. Yeah, it's rained again. Damn, even on the sunny days. It's just mud everywhere. I thought I'd just continue this conversation because it's probably worth a big, long, monstrous video. This whole idea of how to consolidate the story of life on Earth into a game, into some sort of little theme-driven icon describing something that's, intricate. So anyway, the idea of the game will be that you'll, play the game, win and lose, that kind of thing, and, maybe in videos will be interjected into the process, 60 seconds here and there, of images describing life. Maybe some Grey Chow Cho videos, that kind of thing. People have the option to view or not view, and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, but the idea is to, like those videos, to take, the poignant pieces out of life and recognize them for, what they are, to put them in some sort of context. And I guess that's the weird part here, is that certainly people perceive me as stealing, trivializing pleasures. And I certainly see that as a doable, rational process, just because much of what we derive our pleasure through are mechanisms of pettiness and bigotry and nonsense. Idol worships and, rooting for our home team, our guy, and it's usually by a standard that means nothing regarding the character of the person we're rooting for. It really is incredibly biased. Some people talking about bias, and it's just, the biases of our pleasures are just so obvious. They're just so glaring. And but certainly the splendor of those moments, but they are just moments, brief moments, where you know, wallow in it for a moment, you know, they're something, but they're not enough is the point, the overall point. Certainly not enough in comparison to the depth and breadth of the horror, the negative, the bad. When it goes bad in a very bad way. And you know, again, there just seems to be this lack of respect for that. So this accusation of optimism, pessimism can be thrown in here, I suppose. But I mean, watching people trivialize suffering is just so obnoxious. You know, especially when they're not in that circumstance themselves. You know, but even if they were enduring some horror and doing their stoic little buck up thing, it's still obnoxious. Because they're usually doing it from a position where they can actually talk about it. Like it's in the past. They're having a moment of clarity or peace. And because otherwise, yeah, they'd be moaning and screaming and anguishing and trying to find some way to escape the bad that's possessed their consciousness. And then, like, I'm not even haven't even touched on all the, you know, the natural world is really what we're talking about when we're talking about life. As much as we'd like to think the human game is the game, obviously the bulk of the players don't look human, you know, and they're in the game. They're conscious and awake, and they're playing, and it's a hard game, and they're losing, and yeah, it's not nice. So anyway, but conveying that, you know, giving people a feel of that, a touch of that, a taste of that, a smell of that, is a tricky business to do it in a fair, accurate context. To put it next to what is the prize that we've accepted the compromised state for. We've accepted the horror for. And accepted is the tricky word because, yes, we've accepted it because we're not experiencing it. We're not facing it, sitting right there saying, tomorrow you will. And as long as it isn't guaranteed that tomorrow I will, then I probably will today do this, and this, and I won't be paralyzed. And I won't be mindful or distracted or consumed or by what I have presumed not to have as the reality. Can't intimidate me because I'm not seeing it, kind of thing. Because it's not happening to me, not for certain anyway. And people surely do take advantage of that bias of perspective, the bias of probability, that most days the anvil won't hit you. It'll miss and squish somebody else. And you know, you'll be free to play another day. Free to trivialize what it is to have that crushing blow happen to you. Yeah, wet feet again. Day, whatever, in a row. Yeah. Jeez. Anyway, minor. It's irrelevant complaint, really. Beats the hell out of winter, even if it is a bit wet. So anyway, probably enough of an add-on for now. I'll add on the third add-on. Will be show you the the whatever, the template, the old template I'm going to use for the game, and the idea of development and the strategy overall that is subject to modification and whatnot, and again solicit contribution, whatever it may be, which may be absolutely nothing. Which means, I don't know, who's got time? I don't. But we'll see if anything happens. It's worth thinking about, worth giving it some effort, and we'll see what happens. Yeah, I just got, it's probably going to be 4 projects in this project category. And that's just way too many projects for somebody who can barely find reason to take another breath. But anyway, until next time, shortly, soon, perhaps instantaneously, and such. Alright, back again. Last time, I think. Yeah, really. Sorry, this is the old game board that I did like 10 years ago or whatever. And this was for search engines, and so the day, and so it just kind of mocked them. And so you just roll the dice by clicking this box here, and a little thing would go around, and there was different player icons and such. And this version plays, one person against the computer, so the computer automatically takes its turn. And it makes it a little quicker to play that way. And the corner pieces were all different kind of options. So if you land on these, like this one would be like a gambling house, and give you a different choice. See bad news, you lose 50 points, but you land on the whatever it was, some sort of trespassy thing of some kind. And this one with the ask questions and blah blah blah. And so it's a board game. It sort of works, and so I think I'll use this as this structure. Probably have to redesign it. Who knows? I'll start all over, but who knows? But the idea that video would play in here, let's say, or there'd be text in here, doing the life thing and explain the context, and so the game would have images of different life circumstances that would maybe change depending on what kind of life form you were. Yeah, I don't know. I have to think through some of this stuff. How to play the game. I mean, would the game just be about, taking your chances and see when you come out with? That could be a short version. You're a mosquito. You lived 8 days. You got eaten by a bird. The end. Whatever. That kind of thing, or something more elaborate where you have to make a few choices and see how it all ends up in the end. We sort of know how it ends up in the end, don't we? But just how difficult it is to have the good life, to be able to live an honorable life, live comfortably, live well, die well. Doing all of those things is not easy. Yeah, I mean, first you got to be born with some sort of assets in the first place, and then physical assets, health and whatnot, and good looks and whatever. So yeah, and then if you're born a skunk, gets run over by a car, whatever, that kind of stuff. So anyway, so we'll move on to Kantavad. On which one of these videos to go to first. I guess we might as well just go to this one and see what's on there. That's what we'll do. We'll do some of these comments. 54 comments. Let's sort them by thread and see what we got here. Lots of rambling going on there. Lots of rambling there. Okay, so this guy says no. Even afterward, even when you can see that it's all now 100% over and done with, and we can see the infinity we now face. Well, whatever. I think he asked the question here. I don't remember what the question was. I think he just titled it, bias, whatever, 493. That just has to do with this idea that consciousness is something. Well, anyway, my current thinking is that you integrate with a system that is not you in the sense of your ego, but that you were part of it all along. I don't really contemplate the thoughts of the system as my strong association between a thought and the nervous system, yet there would be an energy flowing through structures, and I believe there would be awareness, but I don't think that awareness would be you in the ego sense. It would be more like you, as in you all along sense. So this argument about what really defines us personally, and there's just basically components, isn't there really? You know, certain attitudes, certain tastes, certain capacities to feel, you know. I mean, we all experience life differently, but we have some common experiences, and we have a common way of experiencing, sort of. So, I mean, some of it is a duplication in any form. It doesn't really matter if it has my personality. It just matters that it has a personality kind of argument. Does this imply that the conversation and note comparing is an absurd idea that could not happen given that death erases the I? That was one objection I anticipate. Yeah, again, it erases the one version, and you just redo it again. You relearn, you experience, and do the same, make the same mistakes all over again, come to the same conclusions all over again. So yeah, in a sense, you're going to be just replaying the game. You're doomed as long as they keep forcing you back. I'll be back. I'll be back. Alright, it's the Terminator. It's a program. The Terminator program will be back. Something close enough to Terminator will be back. When the new Terminator came in the second Terminator movie, he was still a Terminator, but he's a little bit different Terminator. But it's still the same thing as a Terminator. Anyway, if it doesn't touch down on some kind of sacred shared experience, then I think it's playing with a syntax game. Shared, I know what you mean. I don't think you know what anybody means except crazy people. I do think consciousness is closer with a realization of the gravity of life. These sentences are just impossible. Mature responsibility, for example, adds value to existence. Adds value to existence in the sense that, yes, it makes you more productive, it makes you more functional. I don't think it makes you necessarily happier. And in a sense, taking on responsibility is among the most important things we can involve ourselves with. That's only important because there's such a mess to clean up that being a good janitor is a good thing. Janitorial duties are about all there are to do on this planet. I think this could become a positive common ground on the big picture of what to do about existence. Yeah, well, again, what to do about existence, if you're thinking existence is running a profit, then there's nothing to do except maximize the profit, make more of a profit by eliminating some of the losses. But if you think life is run at a loss, the thing to do is to turn it off. Sheesh. Soon. It's a lot of thread here. Where is the difference to life itself? Where is the difference to life itself? That doesn't make sense. It would be the same thing. That thought is horrifying to me. Can I just die, please? I don't know. Can you? Die? You mean that you want to cease consciousness after a biological death? That's fine, but what sort of bias would lead you to the conclusion that consciousness itself is a negative value state? Well, again, consciousness itself. You want to talk about consciousness itself? Consciousness isn't in itself. Your consciousness is in different states. It's in blissful states and unblissful, unpleasant states. There's just no way to say itself. There just isn't. And the argument can be made that the states that you feel that are blissful tend to be created because you were first put in a negative condition. You were first made needful of advancement in your state of being. And you drive pleasure in the advancement. But again, if it is true that you had to incur the negative to gain that appreciation, to gain that capacity to be hungry, to want, to be satisfied, that deprivation, well then that would be in and of itself a negative function. That would mean that the machine is consuming more than it's producing. Consuming more than it's producing. Consuming more than it is producing. It's an important concept. I think that because death is the status quo to me, and you make it sound like there is a need want to compare your life to somewhere else that demands satisfaction apart from that there is not really a difference between life and death without want need. you would probably go insane after a period of time. But does it really matter? Well, I think it always matters if you go insane. Insanity comes with a whole package of unpleasant sensations, so insanity is not a good thing. Yes, you're correct. Want and need is the problem, and it is just a notion in people's heads, not something evidentially proved that their life was worth living. It's just a notion in their head until they can argue it, explain how it was worth it. And those explanations are always going to be rather vacuous. I'm just wondering whether or not we agree on the value of life after the fact. I mean, all the joy and agony is irreversibly behind us now. The dream nightmare is over and we are awake. As for going insane, okay, what then? Again, well, the point is to do something about the game. If the game is broken, if it's going to keep pushing players into the abyss in some sort of negative way, then you should do something about it. And the only rational thing to do about it is to cut off the idiotic delusion that it is some kind of productive machine, like it somehow is doing something important, necessary, vital, that there's some accomplishment worth the price paid for it. There isn't. Don't you find the thought of floating around without purpose horrifying, at least from the human perspective? Without purpose. Purpose created by what? I don't find it at all horrifying to imagine not cleaning up the mess that sentience creates, not satisfying silly ambitions. I find it perfectly wonderful to imagine no more silly Islamic lunatics, thinking they accomplished something because they bowed 5 times towards Mecca and said bibbidi-babbidi-boo. I mean, I'm perfectly comfortable with that vision of a universe that doesn't have moron monkey humans thinking that's an accomplishment. I'm happy you said it would be for a limited time and not for all of eternity. Well, again, a limited time, I mean, all you have to do is have a little bit of amnesia and you can do the same thing over and over again forever, right? So, I mean, it's just a construct of your own imagination. Frankly, I could play video. If a video game had a zillion million levels, then I could probably play a zillion million levels, because once you're playing, you're playing. And as long as it throws something new at you, yeah, you're on. It's on. Game on. And then, like I said, just add a little bit of amnesia, a little bit of forgetfulness, and you're all set to play it some more. I mean, even if you had just the choice of, like, every day you played a different game. One day you played baseball, like professionally, let's say. Baseball, and the next day you played basketball, and the next day it was hockey, and the next day it was soccer, and the next day it was whatever, curling, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You could pretty much never get sick of something, because it's always, you know what I'm saying, there's something new coming along. There's always something new coming along. By the time you're playing it again, you're kind of hungry for it again. Get it? I just think it's a silly notion, to just pretense of boredom. Alright, existence for the sake of existence. Okay, but please not while I'm still on board, or whatever that means. But again, existence for the sake of existence, replication for the sake of... These are not good things. This isn't something intelligent people should find satisfactory. Don't you find the thought of floating around without purpose horrifying, at least from the human perspective? That's a quote from the other guy. And the kind of odd responds, maybe, maybe not, of course. But that's the existential panic I refer to. I don't think it is. I mean, why would I worry about floating around somewhere? Why, as of a rock? You see why I'm harping on this so persistently? Question mark. It strikes me as an issue that matters. No, I don't see how it matters at all. You're going to live and then you're going to be dead. And the process of being conscious is happening. There's 7 billion human beings. They represent human consciousness on Earth. They demonstrate what the likelihoods and probabilities are. I personally, wouldn't pay any money. you'd have to give me a big pile of money to be 99.9999% of those assholes. Because in my opinion, they're assholes. I wouldn't want to be them. No matter what they feel, no matter how good they feel, I wouldn't want to be them. Yeah. It is really the only thing that matters, if you ask me. I don't know what that means. The ultimate question is, are happy people an error? Obviously it's not an error, but what does happy people mean? Do you mean like every day they're happy, like every single minute of their life they're happy? I mean, it just doesn't mean anything, are happy people. What the fuck does that mean? I mean, I could just turn the word around, just add passionate people. Are passionate people in error? Are devoted people in error? Are mission-oriented people in error? I mean, what do you want out of existence is the question. And if all you want is some sense of a full belly, well, yeah, that's not too hard to do. But you want to be healthy at the same time? Well, then it's a little more difficult, a little more complicated then, isn't it? Then you have to control some of it a little bit. And if you really want to maximize your efficiency, well, then it's going to take a little bit of work. And yeah, happiness all the time probably isn't going to be what you're going to have. But again, I'm going to argue that the only thing to be is productive. So you're either eliminating, preventing harm in the world, or you're failing. That's the only mission statement, preventing harm. Whether it's your harm to yourself or harm to other people, harm is the one true, guaranteed, good thing you can produce. How should I know? Do you think happiness is something real and not a projection of your own ego? Well, it's not only just a projection, it's not only just a delusion, but yeah, the likelihood is your existence itself comes at a price. The whole biosphere has to suffer to produce your oxygen and to clean up your waste and to do all that shit. All these other organisms have to live in a hellhole. They're your slaves, essentially. And then you have these practical slaves of cheap labor and dismal circumstances that create the desperate circumstances that allow you to have a comfortable life. So if you are happy, you're probably doing it at somebody else's unhappiness. And that makes you probably unproductive. It just might be. Then again, that goes for unhappiness too, no? He's probably linking to one of his own videos. Are you talking about existence, not sentient existence in that video? I don't see that as the same thing. If happy people are just happy because of ego, why not unhappy people being unhappy because they're ego too? Well, I guess again you have to recognize the thing that knowledge is the weight that we carry, right? Then we go back to the biblical metaphor, the tree of knowledge. Knowledge comes with a burden. Understanding responsibilities comes with burdens. Understanding implications comes with burdens. So yeah, you're less likely to be happy if you're knowledgeable, because knowledge gives you understanding of the price and the consequences and all the rest of that crap. And so yeah, it's a lot easier to live when you don't know you're a criminal, when you don't know you're hurting something. The ignorance of pretending animals aren't conscious while you eat them, that kind of nonsense. I never denied that. To me, it's just a function of sentience to be happy suffer. I just think happy people are deluding themselves. Then again, how should I know what the true for someone else, what is true for someone else? Well, again, we're all living in the same world. We should be able to draw some conclusions. They're true no matter who you are. Happy people are may indeed be deluding themselves, but then again, that might just be an easy go for unhappy people, whatever that means. Again, this argument, pessimist, optimist, the facts are just ugly. You want to keep pretending they're not? Go ahead and pretend, but that's all you're doing. You're just denying the truth. Alright, it is replication for the sake of replication. It is 3.5 billion years of gladiator war, 500 million of which where the animals were screaming in horror. And you want to just pretend it's not happening? Well, fine. I think that's just bullshit. Intuition seems the only real tiebreaker here. Oh, bullshit. Intuition is your fucking retard. That's the retard talking, the deluded asshole. And intuition can arguably be replaced by subconscious bias. That's the whole point, really. Well, whatever. Again, exactly. Intuition's horribly biased. It's certainly more biased than thoughtful contemplation. So why would I go, if I have a choice between thoughtful contemplation and intuition, why the fuck would I ever choose intuition? Unless it was to my own advantage. Unless the intuition was telling me something I wanted to hear. I know it is a long shot, but do you think someone is biased if they feel pain when you torture them? Yeah, this will be a good answer, right? Do you think we feel bias when we orgasm? Do you think we feel bias when we orgasm? What the hell kind of answer is that? Every example has its counterpart. This is a fucking counterpart? Do you think we feel bias when we orgasm. Now, I'm sorry, that just doesn't make any goddamn sense at all. I mean, obviously, orgasm biases us. It's a biased sensation, and pain is a biasing sensation in the sense that it will establish that certain activities are going to be unpleasant for you, or certain activities will be pleasant for you. But the fact that the sensations themselves are negative and the sensation is positive is a fact. It's not a bias. You can't escape this bias. This bias is the definer of the value. It establishes the fact that it's wet. It's not a bias that water is wet. It's a description of what water is. I've always interpreted orgasm as relief from something. I wouldn't exactly call it a positive counterpart. True enough. I mean, orgasm, I argue, is basically a manifestation of the subtle torments, the subtle strangulation that is happening inside of you all the time. And orgasm is just basically a release of that tension. Choose your pleasure then. Orgasm with 50 of the sex partners of your choice. Whatever, I don't know, I'm going to have an orgasm with 50 people at the same time and that's going to mean something to me? I don't know what that means. I'm going to have 50 orgasms? What is that? What is that? 10-hour massage with an entire orchestra playing, being shot from a cannon. Or just use your imagination, shooting heroin into your veins, but with no negative consequences. Again, but who's the argument is still going to, I'm going to still make the argument that obviously people are taking heroin because they're in a state they want to escape. So again, these are all escapes from a negative condition that doesn't need to exist in the first place. You don't shoot heroin if you're comfortable and happy. This is the thing. Isn't everything we desire just relief from something? There, good point. It might be, but it depends upon the person. Okay, there you go. It might be, but it depends upon the person. No, come on. No, the point is isn't it just that there's no special circumstances? The point is that anybody who's experiencing pleasure is likely deriving it as a mechanism of relief from some other negative force that's inside them. For example, imagine someone who has never experienced happiness or joy. That person might assume that positive is only a movement towards a neutral state. For example, imagine someone who's never experienced happiness or joy. Well, again, how could that? You can't imagine that, can you? Is it possible to imagine that? I don't think it's really possible to imagine that. But for someone in a state of joy, little pleasures are a plus, in addition to a pre-existing state. Well, again, to somebody in horrible pain, little advancements out of that misery are huge pluses. But you certainly wouldn't want to be in their relative state. They're still, they were 700% in a worse state than you, and the fact that they get to be 300% in a worse state than you doesn't mean that all of a sudden you want to be in their state to feel that pleasure. I don't want the pleasure of, the sensation of the horrible pain because there's a hole in my eye subsides. Yeah, I don't need that pleasure. Thank you very much. But is that a realistic view given our biased nature? I personally find that hard to comprehend. Well, again, I find it impossible, so I agree with you there. But this biased nature is a little tricky. Our psychology is biased. Our intelligence doesn't have to be. Is what a realistic view, that there are people who approach life from the presupposition that life is good? No, that you argued that they had some predisposition to never know a negative, because the aggregate of their existence seemed to indicate that conclusively is good. That conclusively is good. It's not enough. Not enough for a well-written sentence. Why should it be any less realistic than someone who approaches life from a life sucks perspective because their experiences led them to that position? Well, again, then you're just going to argue optimist against pessimist, and I'm going to argue that there's a better argument here, one that deals with the facts about what exactly a positive sensation is and how we derive it through hunger, which is the real bias. So you won't concede that the real bias in us is this mechanism of hunger and desire. That's the bias. And the sensations, the raw sensations themselves are not biases. And the fact is if you actually analyze the proportions with which you experience negative sensations and positive sensations, and analyze those sensations themselves, you'll likely recognize that you do not derive enough of the positive. It's only hunger that keeps you in the game. And on top of that, that many of your positive sensations are superficial, trivial, and vacant of real substance. Alright, I'm going to finish this thread and we'll be done with this. As I said, as realistic as it gets from the bias point of view, I don't know. It's just hard for me to make the connection. Pain, arrow greater than positive, and it would mean that death is ultimately something negative. I mean, it's a matter of where you draw the line, neutral. Well, again, this idea of a neutrality in a circumstance, bliss might be the neutral consequence of just getting rid of the negative state. I guess it's a matter of where you draw the line, quite. It's neutral, a positive or negative state. Is neutral, a positive, negative state. And how does one determine that? Well, like I said, I don't think there is such a thing as a conscious neutral state. And, nor a legitimate positive state. All you have is degrees of negative states. And because some negative states are less negative than other negative states, you assume they're positive. Some way it is negative and some say it's positive. That too would indicate a bias. Again, there's no point in saying that the word positive and negative are intrinsically biased. What's biased is in how we interpret them and how they're experienced, whether they're experienced through our psychology or whether they're experienced as a consequence of something more complex, or understood through something more complex in terms of a logical thought process. And if you don't want to apply thinking, then yeah, you're not going to be able to do philosophy. If all you're going to do is talk about what you feel, then you're not being a philosopher. That is a good point. It's something to think about at least. No, anyway, I don't think so. So yeah, enough of this shit. But it's all this negating of any real substance to the negative facts, the negative weight, the fact that some of these things you wouldn't do on any kind of bet if they were really going to happen to you. The game would be a non-starter for you if you really had to face your victims, if you really had to shove people actually in the trunk of your car and force them to endure your joyride. And that's all it is. It's a joyride. You're not accomplishing anything. And in your best circumstance, you're cleaning up a mess that shouldn't have been made in the first place. There is nothing else here. The rest of it is superficial, trivial delusions and notions in your stupid fucking heads. And you're doing it force marching a bunch of victims that you drag through the gauntlet of horror so you can play a silly game. And that makes you quite insidious and monstrous. Oh my.